Motor sits right here, and I'll actually have to zoom out to see that. And there's just 3 small screws threaded into the plastic housing. Your wiring connector to the motor, and that actually runs out through the loom. But it runs back here, and the resistor's actually right down there behind that plug. You can see the screw up top. There's one more below. This one's nice and easy to get to. So this is a 2000 model Ford F250, and the blower motor still works, but I don't think these actually have bearings in them. I've never actually taken a motor apart to see if it's bearings. Most of these smaller motors like this are just a brass bushing or a bronze bushing sometimes, and they're oiled. But as they get old or worn out, or if a vehicle sits a lot and there's high humidity, you'll get some corrosion there, and you'll hear this squall, just like a bad ceiling fan or a bad house fan or a bad DC motor, in an RC car. And eventually they'll either quit or they'll slow down and they'll stop blowing as much air. But it's also pretty hard on the wiring to have a motor in that condition. That's going to create more resistance, and as the resistance goes up, then so does the power draw, and as the power draw goes up, heat due to resistance is directly proportional to an increase in current, so it's kind of self-perpetuating. It snowballs there, and fortunately this one's rather easy to get to. They vary a bit, but what can end up happening is you'll end up burning up your switch, your wiring between. Besides, it's getting old, this being now a 17-year-old vehicle. There's probably a fair amount of corrosion just due to age on the wiring on the connectors. There's a resistor module in here, and I'll actually show you where it's at. It's actually rather easy to get to on these trucks. Most full-size American vehicles, I say American, but they're, a lot of the supposedly imports are more made in America than some of our traditional big 3 are. But really what happens from your fan switch, you're always dumping, regardless of speed, full battery 12 volt, it's actually over 12, but essentially 12 volt DC to it. And depending on your switch selection, depends on which resistor you go through. High speed, direct pass through, no resistor, and this is a 4-speed. So the other 3 speeds, I'll go through a varying resistance, which actually drops the voltage. So instead of doing something fancy like pulse width modulation, these are just straight resistor and dropping the voltage. Well, it can end up happening, and of course these can go bad on their own just from age. But with a bad motor, that power draw will go up. You'll actually burn up these resistors, or sometimes the contact in your switch, or the wiring itself, or the connectors. But these are pretty common to go bad on an old vehicle, especially with a bad blower motor. And the symptom would be maybe you lose low speed or speed 3. Generally your high speed will work because that's a direct pass through, no resistor, but you'll lose one or more of these speeds because that resistor is burned up. So knowing that motor's bad, I want to replace it before I fry the resistor or the switch contacts or make things any worse. So we'll take a look actually at this vehicle. It is quite easy to do. Motor sits right here, and I'll actually have to zoom out to see that. And there's just 3 small screws threaded into the plastic housing. Your wiring connector to the motor, and that actually runs out through the loom. But it runs back here, and the resistor's actually right down there behind that plug. You can see the screw up top. There's one more below. This one's nice and easy to get to. On a Lincoln Town Car that we had, it was actually buried way back here, and one of the guys joked on one of the forums it'd be the same as a Crown Vic. It was a 2000 model. I know it was a 2001, but they were the same for about a 10-year stretch there. Anyway, the joke on the forum was that it would almost be easier to pull the motor than to get it out. I had to pull one of the heater hoses, I think a fuel injector plug, one of the coils. I had to pull part of the cowling because it was buried up under there. And it was actually a much larger resistor because it was the multi-speed fan instead of the traditional, it was the digital multi-speed instead of this traditional 4-speed. So just a 3-position resistor on this one. So this one's quite easy to get to. I'm not going to bother with it since it's still working, but I've got the part and I'll put it in the glove box. Something else you may run into when you replace these, and the Dorman kit I bought, even though I just had the resistor pulled out, actually came with a replacement plug. So sometimes you'll see corrosion there at the connectors where it connects to the resistor. So it won't do you a whole lot of good to just replace the resistor without replacing this pigtail here. So they call it a pigtail piece. You actually splice the wires right down here and you have a new connector. So you also have an air bypass hose. The motor actually sucks in some of the air that it's blowing out of this housing to cool itself. So really you disconnect that. You can either do it up here at the motor end, which it's just kind of, you know, little rubber band in on it. Disconnect your connector, 3 bolts, slides out. With the squirrel cage on there, it may be kind of hard to clear right here, so we're going to have to see how that goes. I'm going to take a small screwdriver here and just help myself get that connector off of there. I may take a pair of them here. And bang that elbow up nice. That's going to help the grip strength. Okay. Wire disconnected. The connectors actually look pretty clean. I don't really see any signs of corrosion there. That's a good thing for us. We'll pull our little boot there, our strap. There's our vent hose. So now we've just got the 3 screws here to get out. And these top 2 look like they'll be alright to get to. These are an 8mm head, 5/16 is really about the same size, so we'll interchange. That 3rd one on the bottom is going to be a little bit tough. I'm actually going to try a deep socket and see if that puts me spaced out just enough to get a little travel. Okay, so we've got let's see, we're not going to clear like about 10mm right there. I'll move this out of the way. Cruise module is disconnected, now we can get it out of the way. Cruise module sitting up here. Lower motor pulls straight out of there. Lower motor pulls straight out of there. Doesn't spin real free there. Not squalling at the moment, but you may not be able to hear that on the camera. Definitely a little loose in that motor. So you can buy the bare motor and try to take your squirrel cage off. This is a press-on nut, kind of like the axle caps on a wagon or your kid's Power Wheels. I'm worried about them seizing up over time, you know, even though it's plastic, but being stuck on that shaft. I tried one once. Plastic was old and brittle and it cracked. To me it wasn't worth it, especially no more than these cost. I think this was about $50 on Rock Auto to buy the new one with the wheel already attached. Of course it's a aftermarket brand, a TYC that I'm putting on there. There's also a gasket here. Replacement one should come with that. You definitely want to put that on there. If by chance you find a cheap one that doesn't come with one, just reuse your old one there. It should peel off. So here's our new Rock Auto Special. Get a hold of the gasket there. Amazon also has these. Local parts may not be able to see here, but our holes line up. Larger holes are for the screws, obviously, and then the smaller holes are just little plastic nubs or studs sticking out, little alignment nubs. Remember, our orientation, the plug was over here, so when we go back in, I'm actually going to pull this off, it's going to be a whole lot easier. Knock out some of this dirt. It'll be a good time to clean up in here if you have a lot of gunk or something. Actually, there's standing water in the bottom, which means my drain's clogged or not working, or I've got a leak up there, who knows. Surprising for rubber this old that it's not wanting to tear. Really surprising. Get one screw started here. Now I think we can start this other top one pretty easily by hand. We can see the hole. Try to get the right socket. They don't need to be real tight. They're just really like sheet metal screws, plastic thread screws. They're threading in the plastic. Self-tapping screws, basically. Self-threading or thread cutting. So if you go to tighten them real hard, you're just going to strip it out, heat up the plastic. So just nice and firm, not even what you would call snug, considering, you know, compared to a bolt. Just seated down good, and that's it. Especially with plastic this old, it's going to be a little bit brittle. That should be good. Our hose down here, we can see there's just a little keeper, kind of holds it after you get it snapped on there. You could take some dielectric grease and smear it on there, but you could set up some grease. I don't have permission to do it, but I'm just going to call this good enough as it is. Now on this plug, you could probably put some dielectric grease around it to keep moisture in it. It doesn't have any kind of gasket or seal on it. But I'm going to be lazy and skip that. Latched on. See if we can get our cruise module back down here. We got our key on, blower's off. We're going to turn it on. There's low speed. Don't know if you can hear that. I can hear it. I can feel it. Ooh, it's kind of hot out here. There's second speed, third, and fourth. So looks like we've got all 4 speeds. Looks like our new motor, if I could speak, looks like our new motor's working, so I think we can call that a successful fix. Hopefully the resistor holds up, switch holds up. You know, if not, I've got that resistor, so it'll put in rather easily. Big things on these. This obviously is not a real difficult job to do on this vehicle. The general concept's the same on pretty well all of them. It's just the level of difficulty getting to them. Some vehicles it's up under the dash under here. Some it's up underneath under the hood and very difficult to get to. Some take an act of Congress and pulling the dash. So it's a serviceability thing in my mind. I know the manufacturers aren't going to make any money if people continue to run old vehicles instead of buying new ones.